And it's so important to empower them, to say, not only do we want you to identify your cultural, you don't even need to say the cultural part, but, how do you want me to praise you? How does this work for you? You enable them to be metacognitive about all of those things that they themselves are internalizing. Oh, I'd never really thought about. I take it for granted that you would do this and I respond, but actually empowering them to think about their own makeup. As we were saying at the very beginning, we're all uniquely wired, and actually enabling them to think through that with someone of trust to create this environment is, electrifying, isn't it?
Welcome to the Cultural Agility Podcast, where we explore the stories of some of the most advanced intercultural practitioners from around the world to help you become culturally agile and succeed in today's culturally complex world. I'm your host, Marco Blankenberg, the International Director of KnowledgeWorkx, where every day we help individuals and companies achieve relational success in that same complex world.
Welcome, everyone, to the Cultural Agility Podcast. We are thrilled to be here today. We're going to talk about intercultural agility and education. And we have with us today Victoria and Yasemin, who both have such experience in this realm. We're going to pick their brains and learn from them today. So I'm so glad you're here and you can join us. So, Victoria, can you just say hello quickly?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here on this podcast.
It is our joy. I'm going to read your little bio. Victoria is a teacher, a school leader, a coach, and an educational researcher with a passion for intercultural agility. As an expert in intercultural coaching, Victoria's Ph.D. research focuses on cultivating environments which are inclusive and culturally adaptive. Renowned for her empowering coaching approach, Victoria unlocks the potential within individuals, fostering a safe and inclusive space that celebrates and embraces cultural diversity. Her mission is to empower clients to thrive in our intercultural world. We are so glad to have you, Victoria. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Shelley.
And, oh, you're welcome. Great. And then next we have Yasemin. Yasemin, can you say a quick hello?
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
I'm super excited about this.
Me too. Can't wait to get started. Yasemin has been teaching at universities for nearly 3 decades, half of them in the United Arab Emirates, and she's a faculty member teaching intercultural studies along with other general study courses at the Higher Colleges of Technology, which is a federal institution with branches across the UAE. She is an MA in Management and Education. She's a trained Celta Teacher Trainer, has been involved with projects with the UAE's Ministry of Education. And she is also currently doing a Ph.D. in Education with a specific focus on intercultural studies. And she's taught intercultural studies to many undergraduate Emirati students and has lots of stories to share with us later on, which we're really looking forward to. So thank you both for being here. And I'd like to start off, could you please give me a little bit of your backstory, where you grew up, what sparked your interest in intercultural things, and your curiosity regarding culture? So because we're teachers, we'll start alphabetically. So I'll start with Victoria. So Victoria, can you give us a little bit about your backstory?
Yes, of course. So I grew up on a really small island called Guernsey. It's in the Channel Islands. For those of you who have no idea, it's in between England and France. So we're kind of in no man's land. My island is very unique because it's so small, very monocultural. So I didn't really explore the mainland, is what we call it back there. We didn't explore England until I was much older. And that opened my eyes to the real world. Following my teacher training and my teaching experience, I moved over to Singapore, and then I moved over to Shanghai, China. And I think that's really where my passion for culture started, partially because I was the minority. And I think having grown up on an island where I looked like everyone around me. Suddenly I was in a place where everyone stared at me, and the language being spoken was different to my language. And my empathy for that really started at that point and has grown from that point on.
Wow. Yes, I love that. It's such a unique experience to be the minority.
I think
I wish everyone in the world had the chance to feel that,
it's very humbling because, again, being white British woman, I'm very aware of that space that I hold in the world, and actually stepping out of that into a different world was liberating and quite scary. And I think it just gave you that insight into things that we maybe take for granted, other people face on quite a daily basis.
Yes, I agree. I love that you shared that. That's an important point in intercultural agility and studies. So what about you, Yasemin? Give us your backstory.
Well, going back to what Victoria said about, being a minority, I think I felt that throughout my life in different contexts. So I was born and brought up in Germany. My parents are Turkish. So for most of my life, at home, you are basically in a Turkish environment, and then schooling was in a German environment. So, but you still are a little bit like the different one in the classroom back then, looking a little bit darker than the others. Then when I was about 13, my parents decided to move back to Turkey. And that started my second stage of feeling a little bit like a minority. It was different because now I was the stranger, the one that is different, basically, because suddenly I was the one who came from Germany and didn't speak any Turkish. My Turkish was really bad back then. I didn't know the education system. I had major issues at the beginning trying to get used to the education and the expectations from the teachers. So I've always felt a little bit like the outsider and trying to understand where I belong to. And that question was always one of the issues I had, like identity. A lot of people would ask still today, so, are you Turkish or are you German? Where's home? And that question for a very long time, I was not able to answer it, but it was bothering me. But through intercultural studies and learning more about the concepts, and the more I got into intercultural studies, the more I was able to feel where I belong. And that's why I'm so interested in intercultural studies as well.
Yes, I can see that. Oh, thank you for sharing that story. And I wonder how many people listening today have felt that struggle with identity. It's profound. It changes you.
I think for a lot of people, the answer is so obvious, It's your nationality, your identity, where you live, where you brought up. There's so obvious answers to these, but for me, all my life long, that obvious answer was just not there.
Yes.
Like, I don't feel German. I don't feel really particularly Turkish. My home could be anywhere. I'm not quite affiliated. Would I go and live in Germany right now? No, not really. And Turkey, yeah, because my parents are there. But where is home? That quest, that who am I, is a question that can be quite eye-opening, and especially I think that's why intercultural studies and ICI has helped me a lot personally as well, to grow and be at more ease with myself. That's why it's my passion is.
Yes.
And I feel as a teacher here in the UAE, I see a lot of my students are also going through the same struggles where they have, especially now with the UAE students, I think it's very hard for them because Dubai and the UAE is going through this transition of more conservative to more liberal. But my students are sort of the first generation that is having a university degree, and their parents are still more conservative.
Mm-hmm.
They're not as exposed to social media. So my students' quest of identity and what they want in the future, and where do they belong to, where do they see themselves in the future of their own country, these are all very important questions that they have, and ICI actually helps them just to reflect and understand themselves better.
How wonderful that you are in their lives, and you really do relate to that identity crisis. You're there, and you're able to walk them through that. And that brings me to the idea of education. So, Victoria, what sparked your interest in education? Why education, and then why Singapore, and why international education?
The answer to the first question is simple. I was scared to do anything else. I enjoyed being with people. I enjoyed talking. I think most of my friends would agree. I was just one of those. And I didn't really find my passion in teaching until I became a teacher trainer. And I didn't really consider that as a teaching profession until I accidentally slipped into it as part of the leadership structure. Honestly, the reason I moved to Singapore is because I lived in London, and I realized I couldn't live in London and live a great life on a teacher's salary. So I sought pastures new, sunnier climes. And it's interesting. I'd love to pick up on Yasemin's point just for a moment of that idea of finding home. So from Singapore, I moved to Shanghai, and I'm in the UAE as well. So I can mirror Yasemin's point of teaching in an international school rather than a kind of Emirati school, that actually our students of third culture kids still experience that. Where is home? I think a lot of them feel like they're snails. Their home is on their back, and wherever their parents move to next is where they identify as home. So it's interesting to compare that. Although you may be living in the country that you were born, or you may be not, you can find a home in different places depending on where you feel your family are, where your friendship network is. So I find education is such a key to establishing that community for our students, to give them a sense of home, a sense of belonging. Because for me, I think that defines a sense of home for our students, which is integral in this global world that we live in now.
Yes. Oh, I love that. And you teach in international schools. So kids are coming from all over the world. Their parents are living and working in Dubai.
Absolutely. And there's such a transience there, isn't there? Because teachers' contracts change. People are here for a certain amount of time while the contract lasts, and they move. So they may be in different. So, for example, our son, who's now 15, has lived in 4 different countries, and he's only 15. So for him to kind of identify, and Yasemin, the same thing for you, where are you from? How does he even answer that? Like, I was born here, but I spent most of my childhood here, and now I'm here. So I feel as though this generation, especially of third culture kids, is going to be one of, where are your roots, or where's your family's heritage, rather than the simple questions of where are you from. I think the global network now is opening us up, and I think through the work Yasemin is doing with intercultural studies is allowing people to see that possibility.
Yes. And I love, at KnowledgeWorkx, we reframe that question in terms of self-culture, that every person is a uniquely wired cultural human being and has a story. And in non-monocultural, communities, that story is so important. And if you really want to know someone, where are you from? It's just not the right question to start with anymore,
Yeah.
So
Completely.
I love that. What about you, Yasemin? What sparked your interest in education, especially moving interculturally?
I think interesting. I mean, I always, moving back to Turkey, for example, I had some wonderful teachers who approached my situation and myself very positively, and became an inspiration for me. I looked up to these teachers and said, this is the kind of person I would like to be. But then I also had teachers who were just horrible. who wouldn't understand my situation and
Mm-hmm.
who frankly were very, very unprofessional. They would make fun of me. They would fun of the way I was speaking. I mean, it's now I wouldn't be able to understand, like, how does the teacher even have the courage to behave in certain ways towards students? It's unbelievable. And it was Turkey's university entrance system is based on exams. And for me, basically, coming from Germany with, struggling with the Turkish language, for me, the best opportunity was language teaching. So I went into foreign languages, and that's my, passion as well. And I didn't even think of becoming an educator until I was in my last year. And then once I was in the classroom as an intern, that's where I really had the spark. And I'm super glad that I chose this profession.
Me too.
I've met so many students from different lives, but it's a fascinating job because it's never ever the same. It's always changing, and it pushes you as well. You have to change along with the students, along with the new generation, along with the technologies. So it keeps you very much on your toes. Why am I interested in intercultural studies and teaching interculturally? I came here to the UAE, possibly like a lot of teachers. Life in Turkey on a teacher's salary was really hard. And I came here, and I didn't think, to be honest, I would stay here for very long. But then once being in the teacher, I could connect with my students on a different level. For them, I was suddenly the Turkish teacher who is also a Muslim, but who has a very different approach to them. So for me to be with students, Emiratis, Muslim Emirati students, and for them to look at me and see a potential in themselves as they can make changes in their lives, that was a huge inspiration both ways. Because when I came back from Germany to Turkey, some of my family members had a very similar approach to Emirati culture here, where it's like, you don't have to push education so hard. It's back then it was my family, extended family members would say, okay, you can learn you can learn a few skills. You don't need to go to university. And then, when you're 22, 23, you get married and you have a family. And for me, that was like, no. I had aspirations in my life. And it was the start of a journey, not just for my own education and personal development, but also somehow training and educating my own family and changing their perspectives about things. And sharing these with the students here, and the students every now and then coming back to me saying, "Miss, this is great. I want to be like you." And I want, that is a great feeling in the classroom. And you see, yes, even though we are culturally very different, at the end of the day, these are teenagers, these are female, these are students, and aspirations don't change, even though your culture might be completely different.
Yes. Oh, I love hearing that. And I love that you're tangibly making a difference. And isn't that what we love about teaching, is just that opportunity to just really invest in these students and also the teachers. And how did you get introduced to intercultural agility through KnowledgeWorkx? How did each of you kind of find KnowledgeWorkx? Victoria, what about you?
just picking up on Yasmin's point kind of really introduces how I got into it, actually. That idea of looking at the responsibility that teachers have to negotiate different cultural nuances in the classroom. I think often, especially in international scenarios, they teach a British curriculum or an American curriculum, and that somehow assumes the position of the school. But actually, within that little dynamic, within that microcosm of your classroom, you have so many different cultures. And so teachers have that responsibility, that obligation to understand the cultures that are occurring in there and to promote a respect and a cultural agility so that everyone can be harmonious together. So I think that was the first thing that brought my level of awareness to culture in the classroom, and wanting to research how can we, what's a real way of developing this. I think it's probably a challenge we all experience of looking at this soft skills and looking at these emotional sides of behavior and culture, which are hard, as we've just said, hard to pinpoint. What do we mean by this? And how do I really develop that in a classroom environment, in an educational setting? So I wanted to reach out to experts in the field, and thank goodness I found KnowledgeWorkx. Thank goodness I found Marka and Shelley and the team to enlighten me into this paradigm where actually culture was seen as something that we can study, we can embrace, we can promote and understand at a level that was much more tangible and much more meaningful than I had enabled myself to envisage in the past.
That's wonderful. Yes. And just tell us about your journey with KnowledgeWorkx. What did you do after you were introduced to KnowledgeWorkx?
So
was the first thing?
I did the Intercultural coaching course because part of my PhD thesis was working with Arab teachers through a coaching methodology. And I knew that the coaching that I had experienced, the coaching I'd been trained in, wasn't adapting enough to intercultural considerations. I knew that there were elements that they would give a nod to, but it was nowhere near in depth enough. It was nowhere near challenging enough. It wasn't really understanding myself as a cultural persona, and then understanding someone else's culture and understanding how I bridge that gap. So from that incredible coaching course, I just fell in love with it so much more. And I've just been such a passionate follower of KnowledgeWorkx and the work and the podcasts and the blogs ever since. And just trying to constantly emulate in both my research and also my personal and professional life, to emulate all of those spirits and methodologies that KnowledgeWorkx provided for me.
Wow. Thank you for saying that. That's wonderful. What about you, Yasemin? How did you first get introduced to KnowledgeWorkx? It's very different
Well,
angle.
It's very different. It's very different. To be honest, I can't take any credit. It was really the college I work for. So thankfully, we had really visionary leaders. So back then, it was the Ministry of Education was Sheikh Nahyan, and he was working closely with my director, who had been here in this country for 25 years. So he was the one who was the founder of this college with like 14 students in one classroom, down in the Creek area. And they've always strived for improving the students and ensuring that the next generation in the UAE is really up to, world class level with their skills and their vision as well. And they are the ones who really wanted to make sure that the students also are able to keep up with the mission of the country, which is to become more global and to function in this increasingly global UAE, right? So they need the skills to be working with others. In case, just for people who are not very familiar with the UAE, the UAE's population right now is about 10 million. Only 1 million of that is Emirati. So 9 million expats from all kinds of countries are here, from all kinds of cultures are here. So there's a huge emphasis on the ability to work together and have this intercultural awareness and sensitivity. And it was the college who found KnowledgeWorkx, and they developed together a program that would cater for the students' needs. I was selected by my director as one of the first batches of teachers and educators to be trained as an ICI practitioner. And that was the beginning of a whole journey, not only for me, but for a lot of my colleagues. That's how I started teaching ICI. And that went on for nearly a decade.
Wow.
And I have to say, it was one of the most memorable and fascinating and inspiring times as a teacher for me in my professional career.
And while you were teaching, so you were teaching Emirati students, you were teaching them the basics of KnowledgeWorkx's methodology, which is the 3 colors of worldview and 12 dimensions of culture. So you were teaching those things.
Exactly.
And you really enjoyed it, and you saw the impact on the students? You did?
I did, because I think, when I was getting trained, I had a real aha moment for myself. As I said before, all my life long, I spent like 3 decades in my life trying to find the answers to, who am I? Where do I belong to? Where's home? All this identity, and trying to understand why things are different for me, and how I could maybe adapt more to the situations I'm in. It was only with Intercultural, the ICI course, that I finally had an answer that, wow, I had no idea. I'm a third culture kid. I was born, in Germany to Turkish parents, and all the feelings I was going through has a name. I finally had a category. I belonged to a category, which is like the third culture kid.
Yes.
And then all the other concepts through the course that we learned throughout the course, the ladder of inference, or the dimensions, etc. That was an eye-opener for me. And being able to transfer this information, this experience, and this passion that I finally, this lifesaver for me, I just wanted to give that to the students. And it's been amazing, because I saw those aha moments and that spark in the students so many times, over and over again. And once you have that, you just want to have more. You just want to be able to create that aha moment. Because I think for me, since that time, even though I'm not teaching right now intercultural studies to my students, it is still in my classes on a daily basis. Somehow it is integrated. Like today, I right now I'm teaching a course called Future Foresight. And only today in my class, again, I was referring back to the iceberg and, the first impressions and how we might be wrong with assumptions. And you can see there's this dead silence in the classroom of 24 students. And they all look at this iceberg in front of them, and you can see it's slowly, they have some reflections and thinking about things. And I think this course has also, changed a lot for me professionally and personally. And that's why I believe it's so valuable, not just as a teacher, but I think it's a very valuable course that is necessary in a global world right now for any profession, or even as a parent, I think, to have better connections with the people around you and your children.
Yes. Yes, Victoria, you work with teachers, right? Can you talk about how it's impacted them?
Yeah, I mean, I resonate so much with what Yasmin's saying. So just that idea of, almost being so changed that actually after you've done the KnowledgeWorkx course, you can only see things through the cultural lens all of a sudden, that you can't look back again. So
Yeah.
it penetrates everything that you see, think, do, the way you perceive other people. So just to give you an example of that, when I was in China, I had a few colleagues who struggled with the culture, struggled with what they perceived to be, a difference in protocols, let's say. Whereas the more I studied the language, and I think you're right, Yasmin, language and culture bring you so many more insights as to why traditionally some people do it this way, what it means to them to behave in this way, to eat in this way, to talk in this way, that actually is exactly that iceberg. Suddenly you stop seeing what you see with your eyes and you start to see what's much deeper. And that brings such beautiful meaning and such a beautiful appreciation of another culture that actually changes you as a person, because you have this eye-opening moment of, gosh, I'm learning so much more about you, and I'm so grateful that I can see this other side because I want to. And I think it's that desire to see things differently that is so integral. And I think, just to answer your question, Shelley, Yasmin obviously is talking about the students. I wonder whether it's almost harder dealing with the teachers because they're almost more stuck in their ways. They've had, unfortunately, they haven't had Yasmin's building blocks. So they've had longer and longer setting their own mindsets, dispositions, expectations, assumptions, and coming in to get what Yasmin calls those aha moments. It can sometimes feel more of a challenge because you're having to dig past a lot of year on year built assumptions and behaviors that people feel very comfortable with, especially where they're in the majority community of, well, we all behave this way, so this is the way we expect everyone to behave, and pushing them into that sense of, well, let's understand. And one thing that I love, if I may, Shelley, that idea of the 12 dimensions, that we all exist on here. Some of us are in this polarity and some of us are over here, but we're all in the same dimension. And I think that that brings a lovely cohesion to everyone, to understand that difference isn't you live on Mars and I live in, Jupiter. Actually, we're all in the same place. Yes. We're just existing.
Can you give an example? Can you give an example, let's say time, or some of the polarities are status and planning, and does any come to mind?
Well, definitely, again, just to reference China, because I know, Yasmin, we can talk about the Arab culture and the UAE. So just to bring a different one, the one I found most interesting was that idea of, well, I'm looking at 3 colors now, the idea of power, and how power in the Chinese culture was interesting because, again, I saw it so differently. The Chinese culture, generally speaking, students expect the authority figure as the teacher. And coming from a Western pedagogy, that's not how we are. We try and kind of create this community where everyone's equal and we can create this safe space. The teacher's a facilitator. And actually coming into that dynamic where I unnerved a lot of our Chinese students because I wasn't being the authority standing at the front and giving them what they expected. So although I was coming in with my preferred and my belief around preferred pedagogy, actually I was doing a disservice to those students who didn't respond to that. So it was interesting to look at, my understanding of power and response to that, and authority actually was different along that sliding scale.
Oh, it's so important to understand how the students see the role of a teacher. How much authority does that role have? And in the West, you're right, it's much more distributed power, and we listen to each other, we learn from each other, we share ideas. In much of the world, it's not that way, right?
No, I'll add to that example, Victoria, where as a teacher trainer, you're always taught, like, when you're giving feedback, go to the level of the student, be next to the student, show that you are at the same level to create that bond. Whereas in a power-driven society, that doesn't work. It's almost like, what are you doing here sitting with me? And it diminishes the respect that the student then has towards the teacher, which is completely different and throws you, off your balance, because you do, as a teacher, want to have the connection. So everything you do and whatever you've been taught from the Western point of view is now wrong or not suitable, and you have to de-learn and then relearn, which is one of the most important concepts in intercultural studies. Like, you have to forget what you've learned so far, and you need to be open and relearn other concepts that are different.
And that's,
you might not agree with that, but that's okay. It's different.
And it's that cultural agility to recognize in which context do I need to behave in which way, and in which connection with the whole community of the classroom can we create this third space where actually we all understand each other, but we're going to collectively enter into this other zone where everyone finds what works for them, and the teacher has to show such agility to find that right balance within that community.
That third cultural space, don't teachers have this unique responsibility and beautiful, I would say, power to create their own culture in those four walls? It's because you are the authority, and you can shape the rules. You can shape how participation is viewed. You have so much power to shape the culture in that classroom. And if you use the litmus test that we promote, and as what I'm doing in this classroom, is it honoring to all the students? Am I empowering the students? And am I doing right by them? Like, is there justice being done? And those three questions, some teachers only focus on the justice piece or the equality piece, but there's the honoring and the empowering that also needs to. Have you seen that? Have you seen teachers be able to create that space and be culturally agile and recognize there are other worldviews in the room that they need to adapt to?
I think that's a really big journey, and I echo what you say, Shelley. I think you use the word power, and I would say absolutely, and with every great power comes great responsibility. And I feel as though every teacher has a huge responsibility to create that, to be aware of that, and to never take their eye off the ball of the litmus test of where are we today? Because one new behavior, one new addition, we're talking about the transience of some educational settings, one new addition can completely throw that into a different domain. So it's constantly evaluating where you are. I have seen teachers delving into that space. Unfortunately, from my experience, teachers are busy, teachers are overwhelmed, teachers feel like, I understand that this is important, but I don't have time to always prioritize it. And my argument is always, you don't have time not to. If you don't create this, and from what you were saying, Shelley, that litmus test of those three elements creates a psychological safety. And until you have that, what learning can occur that's going to be as meaningful or as productive if the students don't feel that that has been created for them?
Yes. And I think that is the teacher's responsibility to create that. Yasemin, what about you? I mean, have you seen that? And it sounds like you create that in your classroom.
I think, I do feel that the students walk in the class with quite a comfort that they can't find always in the other classes, and they say that as well. And that is purely because I'm trying to respect that, mutual respect, and hearing them and honoring what they actually want and how they would like to would like the classroom atmosphere to be. So by honoring their feelings and their perspectives, I'm able to create this classroom where, it's an open learning environment, and the students are really comfortable talking about very personal things, sometimes, disturbingly personal. I would say disturbing because there are a lot of stories that are happening within, their lives and their families that they don't necessarily have an outlet to talk about these things, and then they will be able to talk about this in the classrooms. Going back to the 12 dimensions that Victoria has said, you gave the example of power. I'm going to give just a very small example of like time, right? Where if you have the policies of you have to be on time, if you're 10 minutes late, you're being marked absent. We're talking about school and college rules and regulations. Yes. So applying these as a teacher, you have to be really careful because, yes, I need to apply the college policies, but in a culture where time and the understanding of the dimension of time is not at the same dimension that you have. So my students, they tend to be late quite a lot. And at the beginning, they would come in late. And if you as a teacher, have this threatening attitude of like, okay, you're late, I'm going to mark you absent. I said, why are you marking me absent? Well, you're late. That's the rule. I'm going by the book, I'm guilt and innocence.
Yes.
So the worldview is going with that. So if you are insisting and without explaining the student what's going on, there's going to be a clash. And that is going to affect the whole, learning environment with your students. So at the beginning, I was trying to do that. And then I realized, they hate me and it's not going anywhere. And I don't like this electricity in the air with the students, right? This huffing and puffing. So I thought, okay, what do I need to do? And try to understand the culture and their dimension and their approach, which is more people oriented. So trying to understand where they come from helped me to really change my approach. So this time I would say, look, you're coming late. And by talking about honor, which is so important in this culture, by going back to their worldview and say, look, Ayup, for those listeners who don't know what it means, it's a shame. It's a shame we have started the class. It's a shame that you're late. It's a shame that you have your teacher wait or you come in. It's disrespectful. It's a shame, etc. You're taking away the right of the other students in the classroom. This is, it's a shame. That's what they understand. And their faces change and they're like, oh, miss, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Wallah, I will not be late. And then you laugh about it and you say, okay, don't be late next time. And then you laugh. And then suddenly,
beautiful.
That little rule that could create so much headache for you becomes an agreed rule in the classroom, but based on another dimension, not necessarily, punishment and I'm going to mark you absent. So it's very important. I mean, we are talking about education, but I think, as I said, these dimensions and understanding these dimensions and the worldviews and trying to then readapt your reaction based on the culture you're dealing with is going to help you build much more better relationships and much more fruitful relationships as well, and that will open up so many doors of amazing stories that you can suddenly share with the people around you.
And that is the essence of intercultural agility, like what you just shared.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an example of a teacher adapting, paying attention How do they view tardiness? How is it different than my own? How can I adjust and adapt to speak their language, so to speak?
Yeah.
And that's just, thank you for sharing that example. That's a great example.
Thank you.
And each of those little things, every time we do that, it's creating that third cultural space. And one thing I talk about in Culture in the Classroom, the course that I've taught, is that I try to encourage teachers to create a classroom charter where at the beginning of the year, you discuss these things with your students with understanding that you are the authority, but you talk about, how do we create trust? How can we create trust that when you walk in these four walls, we trust each other? You trust me, I trust you. What does that look like? How do we celebrate your accomplishments? And then how do I hold you accountable when you don't follow through? What does that look like? And that's going to look different in honor shame. It's going to look different for someone in innocence guilt, and it's going to look different for someone who's used to a power fear classroom. It's like very tricky to navigate. But when you talk about it and you get them thinking about it, it's just it works. It's really,
and it's so important
work
to empower them to say, not only do we want you to identify your cultural, you don't even need to say the cultural part, but how do you want me to praise you? How does this work for you? You enable them to be metacognitive about all of those things that they themselves are internalizing. I'd never really thought about. I take it for granted that you would do this and I respond, but actually empowering them to think about their own makeup, as we were saying at the very beginning.
Yes.
We're all uniquely wired, and actually enabling them to think through that with someone of trust to create this environment is, electrifying, isn't it?
Oh, I love that. Yes. One thing I'd love each of you to share is, what work are you doing for your PhDs, and what are your goals for your future in education? If you were to just dream, what would that look like, and how does intercultural agility kind of play a role in that? So Victoria, can you go first?
Of course. Mine, so my PhD is looking at intercultural coaching, specifically with Arab teachers working within an international school setting, because this is the UAE. We are in this beautiful host country, and yet we typically, in a lot of the schools that I've worked in, impose a Western-centric approach, mindset, pedagogy. And what I'm wanting to do is work with, Western is such a broad term, but for ease, we use that word Western leaders to understand their Arab colleagues, to understand the Arab approach to teaching and learning, and to build, a third cultural space for these teachers and leaders to exist and to communicate. Because, as Yasemin so beautifully put it, there's a way of working with the students to create that magic, but actually these are two colleagues who are at senior levels, but who don't always see assessment or timings of getting these next things done, or the way that you're evaluating a lesson. There's no shared understanding, from my experience, that is adequate to make that relationship fruitful. So my work through my PhD study is to look at how can we build a culture of coaching with Arab staff and Western leaders to bridge that gap and create a mutual space of understanding and trust in which that development of learning can occur.
Oh, wow. That's profound work. Oh, I hope that just makes such an impact.
So do I, Shelley. I can't begin to tell you how hopeful I am to get through the Viva.
We are your cheerleaders. That is such good work. Wow. What about you?
Very,
Yasemin?
very important as well. I feel quite inspired. Maybe I should change my topic. I'm actually quite at the beginning of my studies. I'm still at the exploration stage, let's say, but my focus is third culture adults. Having come from this background and personal interest, and especially I want to focus on concepts of the 12 dimensions, like concepts of identity. Where do I belong to? How do they make career choice? So my focus is students specifically. It's Emirati students who have an Emirati father and a non-Emirati mother. And the reason I chose this was because Emirati fathers here, of course, being the patriarch of the family, have huge effects on the children. And the reason why I want to look at Emirati moms is I want to see the different perspectives of, not necessarily Muslim, but also not Muslim, not Emirati, and how that affects today's generation here in the UAE. And the aim in doing this is basically I would like to see what affects these students in their career choices, for example. And these are where the dimensions come in terms of, the status and the power and the destiny. Is it directive, etc.? All of these ideas, in order to better understand the makeup right now with the students that we have. And things are changing all the time. When I first came, about 10 years ago, when I first started teaching ICI, I used to ask in the classroom, who is a third culture kid? After a long introduction, raise your hand if you are a third culture child. And no one would raise their hand, even though physically, from the physical features, you definitely see genetically there is some, other influence, and the students would not say it. I would ask, do you have a non-Emirati, person in your family? Maybe somebody got married to someone. Nobody would raise their hand. It was such a, I don't want to say taboo, but it was a topic that they were not comfortable talking about because they were possibly also afraid of certain stigmas coming along with that. But now, 10 years later, I asked the same question in the class, and the students, without hesitation, raise their hand and proudly can say, yes, my mom is this, or my dad is this, etc. So they own their diversity beautifully, which I think is great. It's empowering for them. And I want to see how this is affecting other aspects, such as career choice and where they see themselves, especially as a role, in their role as a female. So I'm exploring that, but I'm still.
That's fascinating.
I have to say, I'm still at the beginning. I'm wiggling around with some of the ideas, and Victoria, maybe you can give me some ideas as well.
I love it. So basically, you're saying that those students are raised in an intercultural home, so they could have very different cultural worldviews just from their mother and father. That would be possible, and then how does that impact them individually and future choices? Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Exactly, because the assumption is generally, and we shouldn't assume, that's one thing we learn in this course, right?
Never assume.
The general assumption is that, that the students, like Emirati students or Arab students, they grow up in certain ways with the influence of their identity and religion, etc. But once you open that little door and you are having a glimpse into family backgrounds, it's so diverse. It's
Yes.
immensely diverse. And the students, there are so many students who are very much able to balance this, these two worlds, basically. And it's also interesting to see how in their families they see the differences play out between mom and dad.
Yeah.
I have a student, for
Fascinating.
example, during COVID, that was fascinating for me. So she's super sweet girl, super sweet, super smart. And her mom is Russian and her dad is Emirati. And during COVID, when we had to, go with the rules and we had to go vaccinations, etc. Her mom didn't want her to get vaccinated, but her dad wanted her to get vaccinated, and the mom doesn't want to, and the child is in between, and the child has to get vaccinated. Otherwise, you can't, go. You can't. You're
do
not
anything.
allowed. You're not allowed on campus if you're not vaccinated. So, and I ran into them in IKEA in Festival City with the mom. And the mom was like outspoken. She talked to me, lovely woman, and you can see this different, this diversity and how this child is balancing, the relationship between her mom and her dad, but trying to exist as an individual,
Yes.
in between those two worlds, and
Challenging.
trying to, have them. Make them aware that she also has a voice and that voice needs to be heard. It's very interesting. So I'm interested in these areas.
Yeah,
as I
that's
said, I'm
such good
still
work.
finding out.
Such good work. My friend Chris O'Shaughnessy is an expert in third culture kids, and he uses the picture of a hallway. He calls them children of the hallway because so if they're standing in a hallway, one room is, say they have an honor shame culture at home primarily, and then they go to school and it's much more innocence guilt, that Western kind of pedagogy, and then their friends are from all over the world and they have their own mix of all three worldviews, and they go from room to room, but they kind of live in the hallway because
That's a beautiful metaphor.
isn't it? I love it. Every time I share it with a third
Actually,
culture
makes so
kid,
much
they're
sense.
like, yeah.
Yeah.
And he also says that third culture kids find each other. It's uncanny. Like hallway kids find other hallway kids because it's such a unique experience and it transcends culture. So you'll find third culture kids form their own little group because they've experienced that life in the hallway. And somebody who doesn't know that, go ahead. Yeah.
There's a lot of research backing up that idea that third culture kids, wherever they go, like a magnet, they actually find each other.
Yes.
Because that's their comfort zone. That's where they feel comfortable. Because as you said, all the others in that hallway have experienced the same thing. So you become this little clique, and it's your comfort zone because you know that the other person has gone through those. A friend of mine right now, her son, they're Syrian, but he was, brought up here in the UAE for many years. He's gone to Germany to study electronics in Munich. Lovely guy. And we were quite worried about the environment. Is he going to have friends, etc.? And at the beginning, he said, yeah, I feel a bit strange. My language is not very well. I don't know if I like this place or not. 3 months later, literally, he came back. Yep, I'm staying here. I love it. And we said, like, who are your friends? And then it was, I don't know, a girl from Brazil, another guy from France, another guy from this.
I love that.
They established that little group of, little United Colors
hallway
of Benetton
kids.
in Munich, in that department, and they all found each other, and they hang out together, and they cook together. And now they said that the other members in the classrooms, the monoculture, like the German students, would say, "Oh, this is so interesting. Can we join you? What are you eating? What is that?" So now they have become almost this tool, or this movement to create like ripple effects. Now they have become the center of change in their own classes. And that ripple effect is now going on. And 5 years with these people together and the students together is going to make a huge effect on the others.
And I think third culture kids have the ability and the potential to impact the world in that way, to show us intercultural agility, because they do it every day. They live in different rooms.
And they also have that resilience, don't they? Because they've had to be resilient in that hallway living of a little bit, 1 foot in here, 1 foot back here. And actually that they can show that to others, that they celebrate everyone. They don't have a preference of this or that. They just accept and are excited by this new food, this word, this approach, this way of living that actually emanates this adventure, especially at university life. It's fun to just get on board and learn from others, which is such a powerful mindset to bring to a community. Open-mindedness.
Curiosity.
Correct.
That's not
I mean, I have to also add, it's not always an easy task as a third culture kid. To have this
downsides.
Let's say patience, or it goes both ways. I see that in my relationship. My husband is, British, as you saw. So even within relationships, like, where as a third culture, you're so used to go from one room to the other room and bam, in, out, and you adapt so quickly without knowing. I adapt accordingly, and I'm not, even aware that I'm doing that so fast. And when you forget sometimes that other people are not as agile, and it takes a bit longer, and they need a little bit more guidance, definitely patience, but also guidance. And that frustration, I can see that sometimes, not being able to keep up with that fast pace, that agility, can be sometimes frustrating on both sides. Where my husband would be like, "I don't understand. What are you saying?" Oops.
Ambulance going by.
Where it would be, slow down. I don't get it. What is it that, one thing at a time? Could be a man's thing. I don't know. But
I think it's universal.
As a third culture kid, you do things quickly, and you are able to adapt quickly to a situation. And if, like, say, as an educator, if you are working with other people, you need to realize that you need to have the patience to allow others to develop that agility, even if it's not at the same pace as yours right now. It's a skill. Well, it's a skill, right? It's a skill set that really has to be taught and practiced over and over and over again.
I think that's such an important point, Yasemin, that the thing that we focus on is the third culture kids, but actually it's their natural adaptability, their natural agility is then sometimes confronted with people who are fixed mindsets, who are monocultural, like I was in my growing up, that actually...
Same with me.
Yeah, and it can be odd for the third culture kids to see people that are so single-minded, fixed mindset, and actually they have to learn a new string to their bow to be able to adapt to how do I penetrate you, how do I get over there with you, being very close-minded compared to my exposure to a lot of different cultures. And I think that definitely resonates in the classrooms that I've worked with teachers, that they've been so long in their mentality, in their space, that, as you were saying, Shelley, this is the classroom rule, this is what we do. I set the tone for what this year will bring. And actually, when the kids, who are the third culture kids, come with that heightened sense of cultural agility, the teachers sometimes feel perhaps surprised or on the back foot of they're not ready to enter into that. So it can be a real kind of tug of war, I suppose, to get that balance right. Thank you for bringing it up, Yasemin. It's a great point to think through.
That is. Well, we have come to the end of our time, and it is, of course, I could talk to you both for hours more. Thank you so much for your insights and your wisdom and the things that you've shared today. I just, I hope everyone listening to this podcast is encouraged and wants to be interculturally agile the way that you two are.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Cultural Agility Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, share it with someone. The best way to help us out is by leaving a review on your favorite podcast app or channel, or forward and recommend this podcast to people around you. As always, if any of the topics we discussed today intrigue you, you will find links to articles discussing them in greater depth in the podcast notes. If you would like to learn more about intercultural intelligence and how you can become more culturally agile, you can find more information and hundreds of articles at KnowledgeWorkx.com. A special thanks to Jason Carter for composing the music on this podcast, and to the whole KnowledgeWorkx team for making this podcast a success. Thank you, Nita Rodriguez, Ara Azizbekian, Rajitha Raj, and thanks to Vip and George for audio production, Rosalind Raj for scheduling, and Caleb Strauss for marketing and helping produce this podcast.